we've got this very simple fundamental idea, right? Carbohydrates are fattening because of their effect on insulin secretion. Okay? Other foods probably aren't. You know? So that's a very simple concept. And yet when you see this stuff debated, and you see even people going against my thinking and explaining why I'm wrong, they will never state the simple fundamental assumption at the heart of it, which is that carbohydrates are fattening. It's 200-year-old wisdom. The more refined they are, the worse they are. The more fructose in them, the sweeter they are, the worse they are. And if you're one of these people whose predisposition to be overweight and lose blood sugar control or triggered by the carbohydrates in the diet, then we can't eat them. Like, we can't eat them. You can't eat them. I can't eat them. Not if we don't want to be 200 pounds heavier than we are right now. Well, but nobody discusses it like that.
And we had that study come out 2 years ago where 88% of the population in America has some level of insulin resistance. So some are very, very insulin resistant, type 2 diabetes, all the rest. And then some are minimal, but they fall within that spectrum where carbohydrate restriction is the answer.
It should be, but even then, it just gets very complicated. So the plant-based community, whatever, they're mostly plants, all plant community, will argue, right, that insulin resistance is caused by fat accumulation in the liver, which is caused by excess fat consumption, not carbs, not sugar, which is metabolized in the liver, but fat. And that's, to me, a misinterpretation of some basic science. But so not only that, then you have the public health, the funding agents at NIH, and they think they've moved behind all this. So they're not on Twitter saying, look at what the plant-based people are saying to the keto guys, the cults, the tribes that we're in. They're listening to the nutrition research community, which has been doing generating noise for 20 years now, ever higher levels of noise because it keeps getting bigger and bigger. And they're asking them what they should study. So again, they just announced yesterday a $150-something million project looking at, dedicated to sort of individualized dietary approaches to disease, the idea being that everyone's different. The good news is that they'll be looking at blood sugar. They'll be giving everyone CGMs, continuous glucose monitors. So they're looking at blood sugar. So that should lead them towards carbohydrate restriction. Bingo. Yeah, I've got one too. I haven't used it yet, but so for them, everyone's different. There's no fundamental questions to be answered anymore. And the people making the decisions are, for the most part, federal bureaucrats, right? If you live in Washington, they're like GS-15s. They're very competent people, and they're good at running a government as well as, depending on what your thoughts about the government are at any moment of time, but they're not the people you would want ultimately deciding on the scientific validity of obesity theories. And then, like we said, the people who rise to the top, who end up at Harvard and Yale and Columbia and run institutes, tend to be people who believe what everyone else believes. That's classic groupthink.
Well, and historically, and you outlined it beautifully in Good Calories, Bad Calories, when you have very powerful people get in powerful positions governmentally or research or whatever, like George McGovern did in the 70s, then you pump out Dietary Guidelines for Americans, first ones in 1980, and we just had the new ones come out, and they're almost identical to the original ones 50 years ago. It just doesn't seem to be moving at any kind of pace towards progress. And I know Nina Teicholz has been frustrated because they're not looking at any of the keto research because, all of those treat a disease of some sort. And so the dietary guidelines are for healthy people. And so this is how healthy people eat. So are we aiming for the
12%? Yeah, exactly.
What?
Yeah, we're aiming for the 12%. That's it would be a good title, Guidelines for the 12%. I think we're working on another book or essay here. Yeah, there's so many problems, but on a fundamental level, I don't know. I always use that phrase, a fundamental level. The advantage we have is people can go on the diet and it works. They can shift the way they eat. I don't like to call it a diet. So they shift the way they eat. They go from eating whatever they're eating right now, that on which they are overweight, obese, diabetic, hypertensive, metabolically disturbed, insulin resistant, pick your terminology, and they stop eating carbs and replace those calories with healthy fats, and they get healthier. That's like an ace in our deck. Four aces up our sleeve. So it's sort of, as long as that's true, this never goes away. And then the conventional wisdom is, well, it's impossible to sustain. And of course, I imagine telling someone, don't try to quit smoking because smoking cessation is impossible to sustain. So I don't know. It's a weird world, Jimmy.
Well, and we've lived in a weird world for a very long time. It's just people are a little more aware of the weirdness now, and they're shifting away from it. I thank God for the internet, like coming along when it did, and the iPhone kind of bursting. This show you're on now is like the longest running health podcast, and it's all about low carb diets. I have never shifted away from my main goal of promoting low carb, and I'm not the only one. There's a bunch of them out there now. I'm just the granddaddy when it comes to interviewing people. But like, it's amazing to me. The alternative media is where people are learning, and they're learning on their own, and they're willingly seeking us out because the mainstream has left them behind.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. The mainstream has failed them. The $158 million, what are we going to learn from that study that's actually going to help people? And the idea is, well, it's, the science. I don't know. It's interesting.
If they just reallocated that money to subsidies to buy steaks, I'd be happy.
Yeah, that would work. Yeah, there are clinical trials. You know me. There are trials I think we could do to settle this, but we have to get people to care. So, and when you say you've been doing this for so long and you haven't gotten off of low carb, and I've been doing it so long, and again, one of the criticisms of my book is I tend to reiterate the same themes over and over again, and that's because I'm thinking of ways to expand the impact, because we have to get to more people. So even the case for keto, I wrote it for, again, give it to your physicians, give it for physicians. I mean, if I was a physician and I was wondering how to make my patients healthy, and my patients keep showing up on this keto diet, I'm thinking maybe if they read the case for keto, they'll understand why other physicians like them find this so compelling.
Well, and look at Eric Westman. That's how he got into the Atkins diet.
Yeah.
He had to go on Atkins and said, I lost weight. I came off of my GERD medication. I did this, I did that. And he's like, what in the world is going on here? Because he was a curious physician. And a lot of the people that get into this, medical professionals that get into keto, they just stumbled on it because patients did well, or they themselves did well eating that way.
Well, and that's why when I get optimistic, I don't think we're going to change the scientific perception. I had hope for that a decade ago when I started NUSI, but that may be too difficult to do. But as a revolution that works from the bottom up, because every success story breeds other success stories, and every doctor who has a patient, so a patient has a brother or sister who did keto who got healthy, so they want to do it and they get healthy, and then their doctor sees that they got healthy, and the doctor themselves says, has an Eric Westman experience, right? What's going on here? Maybe I should try this, and then they get healthy and they talk to other patients. So it spreads. It's slow because it's not disseminated from the top down. There's no government decree involved, but it's the reason it never goes away is because it works. The reason keto is the most searched diet term on Google is because people want to know how to do this, how to get healthy. And I think it's sustainable because people want to sustain their good health.
You know what has changed over the past 15 years? 15 years ago, when people got sick, they went to a medical doctor because they assumed that the medical doctor had nutrition knowledge. They don't, they never have, and all the other things to get them better. Now We have the rise of not just naturopaths, but functional medicine practitioners, nutrition-minded, other kind of medical professionals. You've got a lot of undoctoring going on. I know Bill Davis wrote a book called Undoctored, and it's where patients should take control of their own health. There's lab online. You can go and order your own labs. Now, you still need help interpreting, but you can run your own labs. You got gizmos and gadgets. I wear a ring to track my sleep and my heart rate variability, and I keep track of it on my own, that maybe we don't need medical doctors unless I break my arm.
It's possible. I mean, it's interesting. If you think about it, the medical doctors, well, one of the places we went wrong is we shifted from treatment of disease and injury, like a broken arm, to doctors who are trying to basically doing preventive medicine. And preventive medicine is you've got a hypothesis that if you give them this drug, a statin, or you put them on this diet, a low-fat, mostly plant diet, that they will live longer. And you actually have no evidence whether or not your interaction, your intervention works, because you can put somebody on a low-fat diet, and if they die a week later or 30 years later, you have no idea whether the diet helped or hindered it. There's no information there. So physicians started to see their jobs as preventive medicine. That's what they were told to do, and particularly with the statins and the heart disease medications. And for that, you don't even know if they're helping. They don't know if they're helping. You don't know if they're helping. They're all based on statistical analyses of large data sets so you're probabilistically helping someone live longer. Like, I'm increasing the likelihood by 70% that you'll live longer, but I'm also increasing the likelihood by 30% that you'll die prematurely. Right. Or some of you will die. You have no idea. And then the flip side is, look, you got a problem. I'm 50, 100 pounds overweight, or I'm moving into diabetes, and I don't want to take drugs and inject insulin for the rest of my life, or I'm hypertensive, and they've been telling me to not eat salt, and I've been eating incredibly bland meals for the past 3 years, and I'm now on my blood pressure medications. A couple years ago, I was sitting at my local Berkeley coffee shop when I bumped into one of the world's most famous nutrition writers, and I asked him what he was doing in this part of the world, and he said, well, I was seeing my doctor to get on, my blood pressure's elevated.
Who was it?
No, it will never be said. Doctor-patient or doctor-patient kibitzer privilege here. But anyway, so you've got one of these problems, and then you've got a relative who's saying, hey, I was the same way, and I gave up carbs and replaced it with healthy fats, and now I'm not. So yeah, it's always a good idea to have a doctor involved, so if something goes wrong, you've got a fail-safe. For many people, especially if you're diabetic, you can't do this without medical supervision, because you're going to have to come off your insulin very fast.
Yeah, it changes really fast. I remember Eric Westman telling me that he had someone come off of 200 units of insulin in one day. Like, how would you predict that if you didn't have medical supervision? So you're right.
Well, that's what many of the doctors I interviewed, some of them will, tell their type 2 diabetic patients to stop using insulin before they start the diet, because high blood sugar isn't going to kill them in the short term. And, you have a couple days of elevated blood sugar, and then better than, one critical hypoglycemic episode that sends you to the hospital. Yeah. But yes, that's especially in the age of COVID, I'm of mixed feelings about the benefits of physicians. I think in the medical community, clearly there are things for which they're very important, and other things I think they just lost touch with what medicine really is, which is making patients healthy. Well, not managing chronic disease.
If anything, this pandemic has shown us is the miserable failure of them being preventative care physicians. Like, obviously we have issues that are underlying that then manifested because of this virus. And so it seems to me that should be the indictment that says, hey, you failed.